Okay, let's start the roundtable. Thank you.
So, sorry, just, oh crap, sorry. Just a little, okay. So, sorry for that. Hi everyone, I'm really glad to be here at the FIRA Open Day to discuss about the US Ag Robotics Market. So I'm Julie, I'm investment manager at CAPAGRO, a French VC, which invests in agtech in food tech startups, among them agtech robotic, as we are investor at Nanotechnology and Eco Robotics, so really into these sectors. I'll be the moderator of this session. We'll spend the next hour together. We will have 40 to 45 minutes of discussion and then a Q&A session of 50 to 20 minutes. So now let me introduce you this wonderful panel we have today. So I'm glad to welcome Walt Duflock. Walt is from fifth generation farmers in Monterey County with specialty crops, wine, grapes, and cattle. Walt is actually vice president of innovation at Western Growers and focuses on accelerating commercialization and helping agtech startups in a few key areas of agriculture: harvest automation solution, food safety solution, growers trials. Within 30 years of starter experience in Silicon Valley, including eBay and 3 other companies that were acquired, has helped build the world's best agribusiness, and notably the top agri-food tech accelerator, Thrive. He focused on harvest automation and food safety at Western Growers. I guess all of you know Western Growers, but just a little reminder, Western Growers represents local and regional family farmers growing fresh produce in Arizona, California, Colorado, and New Mexico. Western Growers provide over half the nation, the US nation, fresh fruits, vegetables, and tree nuts, including nearly half of Americans' fresh organic produce. We have also Gabriel David Youtsey. So Gabriel is a chief officer at University of California, specialized in agricultural and natural resources. He is a business and technology leader focused on transformative innovation at the intersection of food, agriculture, health, and technology. He leads a public-private partnership called The Vine, aimed at rapidly commercializing these game-changing technologies, and is one of the leaders of a new Artificial Intelligence Institute for Food System led by Dudsey Davis. Farm automation for specialty crops is one of his key focus areas, bringing together the machine, robotics, computing, and data needed to accelerate real solutions to farmer and food processor. We have also Alain Panko. Alain always had a passion for agriculture. He is in engineering, starting his career as a journalist for a French agricole magazine. Finally, he obtained an MBA in agribusiness in the US. First, in charge of the administration of banana plantation in Central America and then in Martinique, he joined after several years Bonipac in California, where he has been working for 24 years now. He is now one of the partners of Bonipac. Bonipac is a vertically integrated family business from field to market through North America. To give you some key numbers, Bonipac, it's 22 million package of vegetables year-round, both conventional and organic, and it represents 3,500 hectares cultivated several times a year between 2 states, California and Arizona. And finally, Praveen Penmetsa. Praveen is a co-founder and CEO of Monarch Tractor. Praveen has nearly 2 decades of hands-on experience in translating creative visions into product for startups to Fortune 50 companies alike. He currently serves as founders and CEO of Motivo Engineering, a product engineering firm with clients in the mobility, energy, agtech and aerospace sectors. Since 2016, Praveen has focused his effort on agtech solution, building teams to develop and scale the next generation of robotic solution for mobility, food, and automation. So Praveen holds an MSc ME in mechanical engineering from the University of Cincinnati. So thank you everyone for your presence today. We will start the panel now. So first question for Walt. Walt, as a VP of Western Growers, could you give us an overview of the US market in California, particularly for agricultural robotic? We can't hear you, Walt.
Sorry,
That's
you hear me
okay.
now?
Yeah.
Had it on mute. And can you see the screen?
No.
No, hang on. Let me share that out. Sorry, Julie. I had this all set up. There it is. Okay, how about now?
Yeah, it's working now.
Okay, great. So I wanted to give an overview of the California market and the overall US market real quick, just to set the stage for everybody. And really it's focused on the changes in labor that have created the automation opportunity. So if we take a look at some USDA and California numbers in 2018, and I was trying to track down some later stuff, just didn't get there. The U.S. farm output was $133 billion, about 1% of U.S. GDP. So it's a massive opportunity in specialty crops. As part of that, California alone did $50 billion in 2018, including, as you mentioned a minute ago, 2/3 of fruits and nuts and 1/3 of vegetables in the U.S. And 10 crops alone did over $1 billion that year, including grapes, almonds, pistachios, strawberries, lettuce, tomatoes, and oranges. So the agriculture market in the U.S. and California is large, and the automation opportunity is large with it. So let's look at a couple of data points behind that data on Crop Report. So if you look at the last 60 years, the farm count in the U.S. has dropped by almost 40%, and farm size has gone up by over 40%. So we have fewer, bigger operators than a few decades ago, and it's had a big impact on labor. Specifically, there's two types of farm workers that we can look at, the hired and the family farm workers, and both have had massive decreases in the last 50 years. And this turns out to happen for two reasons. Family farms are getting sold to bigger operators, and the family farm workers are shrinking. You see the numbers here, and the overall labor drop is 68% across both categories. So what's been happening is larger operators are buying the family farms, and they're not replacing farm workers from the family with farm workers that are hired. They're replacing it with a lot of automation. As a result, we've managed to triple farm output in the last 70 years, but we've lost all that labor. And the way that that's happening and all that productivity growth is occurring is, no surprise, represented by this market map, right? Shauna Day's excellent work on this market map. Innovation has driven all of this change and all this ability to do more with less. And I would argue if the family farms hadn't been sold to the big farms, this would be happening at a much slower pace. So from Borlaug's genetic wheat modifications that pushed the green revolution, to Haber-Bosch's process that allowed all the synthetic fertilizer, to all the mechanized agriculture improvements, thousands of innovators in ag tech have enabled all the improvement over the last several decades. And I would throw out the suggestion that the Borlaug, Haber, and Bosch would be on Shauna Day's excellent market map if she'd started it a few decades earlier. But they are the Steve Jobs, Elon Musk, and Jeff Bezos of ag tech, no question about it. So we've had all this progress in labor. We've had all this progress with automation. Are we going to get there with harvest? Well, the short answer is maybe, and I'm optimistic. But I do want to explain to everybody why it's so hard. This eye chart that you see in front of you, this is the really hard part of every harvest automation startup. You've got to build all of this yourself. And so this is why it takes so long. In spite of hundreds of millions of dollars of startup investments and hundreds of startup launches over the last 10 plus years, specialty crops overall have a very low percentage of harvest automation. And this is why. Building this stuff is hard. Building this stuff takes a long time. Now, the opportunity and why I'm optimistic is the earlier slides, right? We keep doing more and more with less. And these are the players that are in the fields now that are doing the work. This is again from Shauna's market map. I'm excited that these folks are out there in the fields and that they're taking the advantage of the opportunity. I think we're going to need more and more of these robot solutions out there because farm labor is only getting aging. The aging workforce is real, and it's getting more expensive, which is going to force farmers to react economically. And I will close my brief presentation with a great example, catering to my host from France of Peyrache. Peyrache has done a fantastic job of getting wine grape harvesting done at scale. Our 1,400 acres of wine grapes have been robot harvested for 20 years. And they also have an as-a-service option in Monterey County that my sister uses on her 80 acres. So it's great to see automation being done at scale with big operators like Mondavi and through service providers at smaller scale for more regional operators. I think that's exactly where ag tech needs to go. And I'm excited because I think 1/3 of this problem is solved with tech and 2/3 of it solved with go-to-market and strategy that startups need to implement. So that's my thoughts on the market opportunity for automation.
Thanks, Walt, for this presentation. And just to complete what you said, what is so you mentioned that there is in California you have a lot of different crops. So there is no typical kind of farm or sizing in terms of or crops of size. It's really diversified.
Yes, and in fact, that's one of the biggest challenges with harvest, Julie, is every crop requires its own robot, right? So what works for apples doesn't work for strawberries, and what works for strawberries doesn't work for lemons. And so, yes, the opportunity is solvable, but it's at each crop level, and that's what makes harvest a little bit hard. You have to build robots, and you have to build almost one-offs every time.
Oh, thank you. So I have a question for you, Gabriel. So at the University of California, what is your view on the US market and how you handle the robotic project development?
Yeah, so that's so being from in California, you know, we have a pretty different kind of crop mix, of course, than the rest of the United States, being that we have up to 400 varieties of specialty crops, where most of the states of the United States have, you know, 2 or 3. So quite a different market in California, and Walt did a really nice job of kind of highlighting the challenge, but also the promise of what's coming. You know, how some of these technology projects have really got started. I mean, you know, Walt mentioned the history of Borlaug and others. Back in the day, you know, a lot of this innovation was started by universities, but over time, is university both funding, you know, kind of dried up to really support applied innovations, and the startup world really took notice. You have a broader mix of people that are coming together, universities and startups and growers and supply chain companies. All of them are now launching, in some cases, even competing automation projects because they're very capital intensive. They're pretty non-traditional for VC funding for the traditional startup world. And I would also argue that there's still an early emerging integration of all the experts that are needed, the engineers, the plant scientists, the agronomists, the computer scientists. Those disciplines are just still getting to know each other. And, you know, I would say that that's where the startups have had a really good, early lead in developing some of these solutions, because these bigger, slow-moving organizations like universities and larger companies haven't been able to move as fast to do that work, where startups, where they can find a niche and get the right people together, can create a solution to move things forward. I'd say that's kind of how this technology is starting to develop. I'd say going forward, collaboration between all these entities is going to be really critical. And then I think government funding is going to be really important to unlock in bigger and smarter ways to support the development of these technologies, because of this lack of traditional VC funding that is hard for really wicked hard problems like Walt described in Harvest.
Yeah, completely agree with what you said. It's completely different and kind of new for traditional VC to support this kind of company, really intensive, capitalistic intensive, and we are fully aware that collaboration is really important. So maybe you could give us, because the real difficulty there is to regarding the technology transfer from research to industrialization. So you mentioned the startups which are able to have everyone around the table to do so, but how do you see that, and do you have some feedback on technology transfer? What do you see at the University of California?
Yeah, so it's been happening fairly as far as automation goes at this moment. It's been happening fairly informally now. Companies like Blue River is a good early example of a robotics company. Started in California, developed a weeding solution, among other things. And some of the work that they did, and these are Stanford guys, came from industry, and spent a lot of time at UC Davis in several of our bio and ag engineering labs. There was no formal tech transfer process that happened, but based on some of the early prototypes that they did in the research lab, this company went and then commercialized a solution that was ultimately bought by John Deere. So I'd say tech transfer is still happening a little bit informally between university and government. That's something that we're working on right now to more formalize a more collaborative approach, working with Western growers and their global automation initiative, and creating a process to actually work together on roadmaps that identify where these technology solutions are, where the bottlenecks are, and really trying to get more pre-competitive alignment between the universities, the startups, government entities, and the larger established companies to collaborate on things that really can't be done in a vacuum by one small startup, but really need to be done more systemically across these industries, and identify the pieces that are really low value for a startup that really should be common infrastructure across the system, and then identify the really differentiated parts that need to happen, that have IP associated with them, that companies can take forward and profit from. And so we're really thinking about that approach going forward. And then, just back to my point, really getting those uncommon collaborators together from the engineering and computer science disciplines, who in many cases know nothing, literally nothing about agriculture and how it works, and find out when they come to food producers and farmers that it's pretty damn complex scientifically and operationally, and then vice versa. For the farmers and plant scientists and the ag rep background folks to really understand the engineering mindset and how that and software development can be applied to these problems. So bringing those uncommon collaborators together is going to be key moving forward, and that's how we're trying to help solve the problem.
Thank you, Gabriel. It's really interesting, and this is also bring other question, but we can come back after that. So Alain, at Bonipac, you have a view of the use of ag robotic. Could you give us a little feedback on that?
Yes, good afternoon and good morning. First of all, I think it's important to specify that our extent of use in robotics goes from weeding, automatic thinning, and transplanting. We are now implementing the very first solutions in harvesting, but it's very early on. Overall, the journey in robotics and automation has been rewarding. It's been a challenge for sure, for different reasons. But by now, after for weeding, actually, we've been weeding with some machines now more than 10 years. We can positively say that there's a return on investment on those expensive machines. So overall, the experience has been beneficial. We've learned a lot. We've adapted a lot as growers on bringing those machines in the field. And we also, for sure, had to adapt with the quality of the operators in terms of getting those machines through the fields.
Okay. And what is your view regarding the automation of those machines?
They serve a great purpose, which is saving labor. And that's a primary reason why we've been so interested into developing solutions in robotics. For sure, the cost reduction is also an important factor into the development of those machines. But to really summarize I guess the main purpose of the growers right now in California bringing that type of technology, it's all about being able to replace labor, which is become more and more difficult to get, or if it's here, it's getting obviously more and more costly to operate with it.
Okay, thank you. So just another question for you. So could you be more specific on the reason on the needs and your the constraints of the ag robotics? You give us some information, but could you be more specific on that?
Yes, you know, we need machine that replace multiple workers, which is greatly achieved through all those weeding solutions we implemented. You know, we are replacing crews of 10, 12, 18 people by machines roaming through the field. What we see right now in terms of automation shaping a little bit our future is a lot of equipment that are autonomous and that are not necessarily replacing multiple people. And it's a little bit of a concern towards growers. Some of those machines just replace a tractor driver. You know, the concept of autonomy is very much used right now. It's almost a buzzword. We don't know as growers if autonomy as it is presented to us today is our immediate concern. What we'd love to see shaping, you know, in the next 5 years for sure, are solutions that would especially bring solutions in harvesting. And obviously we are very much into, you know, vegetable harvesting, as everybody knows. You know, everything is done by hand. These are very hard jobs. And it's not only just saving on people, but it's also avoiding tasks that are very difficult for people to perform 8 to 10 hours a day. So these are I guess the target for us is what machine today, excuse me, can replace entire crews or entire gangs of people. That's our #1 priority.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, clearly this is the main topic today, that the automation is not for the moment to able to replace an entire crews, and I think it's the main challenge for the next years. So that's it's a really good transition to Praveen. So Praveen, he was Monarch. Could you maybe present a little bit more your solution?
Yeah, thanks, Julie. And completely agree with Alain and Walt have made some great points. Just an autonomous tractor is not going to solve the challenges. What we need is how do we automate operations, whether it's harvesting, whether it's planting, cultivating, and all the other operations that happen on the field. With that in mind, the other challenges that the farmers are also facing, are on the labor side has been well documented by this panel. There's also an increased scrutiny on the farmers from a regulations and compliance standpoint, and that's starting to increase more and more with respect to how are the operations happening. And we are seeing that come in from the consumer side. Consumers now want to know how, where, what, when on the food side to the greatest detail. And combine that with the sustainability requirements that are now coming from the sellers, right? Almost every major food retailer now has sustainability goals. So we see it as this trifecta, and unfortunately, all of them are acting against the farmer. These are all additional effort for the farmer. So you combine the labor with the sustainability and the data requirements, and now the farmers are getting squeezed. And Julie, like having been in this field for the last 5 years and deploying autonomous solutions, whether it's potato transplanters in Louisiana or broccoli transplanters or cultivators in Salinas, one of the challenges we're also seeing is the farm economics currently do not support multi-million-dollar machines. At least it hugely limits how many people can access the technology. Technology has to be accessible and scalable. That's one of the challenges that I saw in deploying these hundreds of thousands of dollar machines into farms. Sometimes they're millions of dollars. Is the farm economics just don't support it. So then if you go back and look at history, how has this scaled? This has scaled with all the technology being on the platform side, and we have all these special implements. That's how farming has scaled all over the world even today. So that's what led to the genesis of Monarch Tractor, where we said, we need a smart, automated electric machine that can answer the 3 pain points that the farmers are facing, which is labor, the data insights, and also be sustainable at the same time. But the other big challenge we have is we can't take these high-tech solutions and parachute them into a farm where the ecosystem cannot support it. Take a brand new machine and put it in the barn. Is the labor workforce capable of working with these advanced AI machines? Are they capable of maintaining them? Are they capable of fixing them? How do we train these machines and scale it globally? Which is where having a form factor that the existing workforce is familiar with, at the same time we can remove them from the field and get the labor savings that Alain is talking about is important. So that is Monarch Tractor, is we act as a bridge of like tractor drivers understand how tractors work. They can use our tractor much more easily than an existing tractor when you compare it to an advanced robot. At the same time, once they do that operation, they get to move away from the farm, from the farm back to the barn and manage a fleet of tractors. So now suddenly the skilled labor is managing a fleet of 6 to 8 tractors. They can use their existing investments with all the existing implements. So this bridge technologies are needed and to kind of accelerate the ag tech deployments. Otherwise, we'll be limited by the amount of capital that the farmers can deploy or the other institutions can deploy to scale these technologies. And that's our philosophy. And our whole philosophy is also ag is an ecosystem play. We are not going to be able to solve farmers' problems. We can just give them smart tools. We are working with digital companies. We are working with existing implement companies. We are working with smart implement companies and helping them deploy technologies for much cheaper. A sensor that used to cost us a huge amount of money because you're deploying a power source with it, GPS signals with it, and everything else on our tractor can be deployed for a fraction of the cost. So we all have, for us to scale automation globally and make it accessible to every farmer, we have to think about how do we go from where we are to where we all want to be. So that's our mindset, and that's what we're working on.
Thank you, Praveen. So, in a nutshell, what will be regarding everything you said on the importance to fit the 3 criteria and to really fit in the ecosystem of the farmer. What are the business opportunities and the obstacle for such innovation? So.
Yeah, that's a great question, Julie. And I completely agree with what Walt, Alain, and Gabriel said, is we have to get the expenses down. Right now, the expenses are just out of control on the farmer side. But also, how can we increase the value of the crop is another way to look at it. And how can we use data and automation to increase the value? One thing that the silver lining of COVID over the last 18 months has been, the food prices have increased. We have now seen that the food ecosystem can support additional value, whether it's in the delivery side, whether it's in the packaging side, etc. So how do we extract that value for the benefit of the farmer and not the middlemen? How can we kind of enable the farmers to see a larger slice of that revenue? And that's where data comes in, and that's where sustainability comes in. And that's also where automation has a role to play, Julie. So from a business model standpoint, our automation solutions have to decrease the operating expenses, but also allow the farmer to tell their story directly to the consumer and allow them to extract that value from the consumer so that their P&L looks better, their profit and losses look a lot better. So that's our philosophy, and we think there's a huge opportunity there for farmers to be even more profitable long-term with the help of automation solutions.
Thank you, Praveen. Do you have the panelists some other insight you want to share with?
I think it's important to mention that those machines require a level of operators that could possibly be a challenge for the farm to find easily. It's not just the operation of the machine, it is its supervision. I think operations can fail by not realizing that these machines require some special attention when it comes to maintenance, so possibly troubleshooting if there's a problem. And I recognize the importance that farmers should sometime look at as much as mechanical engineers to integrate in their workforce to supervise those machines, especially if they're large operators, which we are. And we, for us, the best thing we ever did was to hire a mechanical engineer to supervise our fleet of machines, whether it's transplanters or weeders. So I think that that's something that needs to be said, so that we are essentially trying to guarantee success.
And that's a great point, Alain. And I would just echo exactly that from the startup perspective. And it's funny, we had a virtual ag tech summit a couple of weeks ago where we talked exactly about that next generation of ag worker, right? It's no longer someone who can just put stuff in the field and take stuff out of the field. It's going to be robot watchers, robot minders, robot manufacturers, and robot repair people. Think about thinning, right? We've done a great job rolling out thinning at scale in specialty crops. You haven't replaced the 20 to 25 person crew entirely. You haven't done away with them. What you've done is required 3 to 5 person crews that are highly technical and highly skilled. And so there's a real opportunity for folks like the UC and the community colleges, junior colleges in California and other states to get these next generation of ag workers trained up with 2-year and 4-year degrees. And then last point on the startup side, I've actually seen startups adopt an as-a-service model because the growers are so concerned about being able to find those labor resources that they just decided it was easier to offer them with the equipment than selling the equipment. So it's had an impact on startup go-to-market as well.
You know, I wanted to come back to, I think that point that Praveen made about food, the value of food products increasing is a good one. You know, in addition to the general market and demand going up, I think I have heard from many growers that, you know, say to me, you know, things like, if you want to help me with product differentiation and product innovation. Whether it's a specialty crop provider or a dairy provider, you know, and so think about some of the innovations that are out there. You know, differentiated products like Sumo oranges and cuties, and even into, you know, now controlled environment agriculture providers are providing differentiated products. That's going to also, you know, kind of raising the top end of the market will, I agree, make a lot of room for automation solutions to happen. It's going to require these disciplines, you know, of crop breeding and automation and novel food processing techniques. They got to come together in new ways, and you can see some of the big suppliers already vertically integrating some of these activities to create that differentiation. So I think that's an important point not to lose sight of, that, you know, raising the value of the products through innovation and differentiation is a really valuable way to actually provide capital room for the automation projects.
Completely agree with that, Gabriel. And also just following on a point that Walt made was, how do we get these new you know, job profiles and job descriptions, I think is also going to attract new talent back into the industry. Historically, Walt showed a great graph about how there's been an outflow of human capital. But with these new kind of jobs and with these new kind of degrees, we are hoping that, you know, with them being more creative work and more challenging technical work, we can get a new workforce back into agriculture to support the automation that all of us are talking about. And that is very exciting. And to make that happen, that needs very much, you know, a public-private partnerships. We have to train this new workforce up. We have to, you know, talk to the people about the opportunities that are there in agriculture on the technical and creative side. And the innovation that Gabriel is talking about is a great example of that, where historically it's been about commodity and volume. How can we differentiate the crops, and how can we kind of use automation to do that? I think we'll really start the human capital side of things is just as important as the technical side.
So on this subject, we have a question from the audience. The question is how the worker sees automation in California, and are they happy with it? Because we are talking about the fact we need to train people to this new works. But what are they feeling now? And are they ready to take this transition?
I think, you know, I think workers embrace the technology, not that they understand it, sometimes not that they are able to operate it, but they know that it's coming. They see that new robotic machine work alongside an old-fashioned style crew, and they know that it's coming. I don't think there's any hard feeling about what's happening. Some of them are actually benefiting from that technology because they are trained and improve their you know, their wage by becoming operators or workers on those machines. So I don't see a challenge for that, you know, in terms of the labor being being a little reluctant to adopt this kind of progress.
Julie, we are seeing the same thing on our side as well, is when we talk to even the tractor drivers, right? Very often they're doing night spraying all night, especially in the vineyard market, right? That's a common operation that's done multiple times. That's exposure to chemicals. That's a full night operation that is not a fun activity, especially when you're doing long rows. So they are much more interested in kind of setting up the equipment and managing it, like Alain said, from the barn, and keeping an eye on the fleet to increase the utilization of it versus being out in the middle of the row on a tractor, going down a half-a-mile row where you're just trying to keep it in the center of the row. So they're excited about the opportunities also for advancement. Some of those tractor drivers have been on those vineyards for 20 plus years, and they haven't seen an advancement path. With these new technologies coming in, they're excited about the advancement path, saying, oh, now I can be a fleet manager. Now I can get the alerts. Now I can spend more time mixing the chemicals and making sure that things are right, versus being out in the middle of the field, in the middle of the day or in the middle of the night. So they're excited about these new opportunities and the advancements that automation presents. But we definitely have a responsibility to walk them through that. We cannot just say, here's the tractor, this will do your job, right? Because that is not true. Like Alain and Walt said, this is not about tractor driving, it's about operations. So we talk to them about how do we automate the spray operation. We don't talk to them about tractor driving or autonomous tractors. That doesn't solve the problem for the farmer. So we talk about cost of spraying with our system versus cost of spraying with the existing system, and cost of labor, cost of materials, and the amount of utilization you can get. So that's how we are talking to the farm owners all the way down to the tractor drivers.
Thank you. Walt, we can't hear you. You're on mute, I think.
Sorry, Julie, one topic I thought might be interesting to get feedback from the group. As I have a lot of conversations with the growers and the startups, it's really interesting to maximize innovation in ag tech. Maybe true in other fields, but for sure true in these fields. Literally, the automations that have gone the furthest have been able to incorporate other disciplines. So think about genetics and farming practices, right? And as you roll out things like thinning and weeding and planting, the way that you design the field and prep it, the way that you get genetic changes like 2D, two-dimensional vertical trees instead of 3D to present to the harvester, the way you present information to the harvester so that visually they can see better, the more weeding and things you do to get stuff out of the way of the harvester, the better off you are. So I think there's a shared opportunity for the growers and the startup innovators to think about things holistically, not just the harvest operation, but the stuff around it. And I just wonder if you've seen some examples or have some thoughts on that topic, because I think it's clear in things like thinning. We've gotten better at thinning and weeding because we've done things around it to help.
Thanks, Walt. We already started actually the Q&A session, so and we'll continue. We have another question from the audience regarding the exploitation of the data. So how do you, maybe it's a question for, I don't know who wants to answer this question, but how do we have feedback about exploitation of historical data series and how we extract value from partial or incomplete data for automation?
We are barely starting to, the first phase, especially on weeding, was to make sure the machines were working. And all the startups and manufacturers were really dedicated to make those machines work in the field in a very practical way. Now we are more at the step, especially in this area, of trying to see what kind of data we can extract from those machines that sees essentially every single plant as it goes through the field. So now this is a stage that is, I would say, fairly new for the growers. with the idea of the grower receiving a report, a completion report at the end of each completed job, describing what the machine has seen. That could be a number of plants, that could be possibly some discoloration plant as a count, average spacing between plants. All this data now is going to start arriving on our desks for interpretation. So it's very early for us and for me, for sure, to say how much value we'll find in that data when we already have a pretty good idea of what is going on in our field. This is certainly a good check, but again, that side of data analysis, we haven't gotten there yet. Totally.
Yeah, Julie, our farmers are also saying the same thing, is they're getting a lot of data, but not enough interpretation of it. So in fact, one of our farmers joked last year when we said, oh, we can give you all this data. He's like, well, I'm going to charge you then if you give me more data. Because he was like, you know, we're inundated with data and it costs me a lot to parse through the data, and we don't have those resources, and those are expensive agronomy people that they have to pay for, right? So as startups, especially in automation, we have to be careful about going to farmers and saying, we'll just give you data. So since last year, we had to kind of change our position to say, hey, you know, we'll give you actionable insights, right? We'll give you like things on what you could do versus data. So we are kind of backing away from just inundating the farmers with data. And they're definitely getting tired of it, especially the ones that we're talking to in California. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of startups that talk to them, and they're like, oh my God, every week I have somebody offering me more data. So yeah, we want users for that data and actions that we can take that will affect the yield and the cost and our expenses, not more data. Yeah. So,
on the flip side, on the technology, you know, data needed to make the technology work, like computer vision, you know, data sets. I think we're finding that we just don't have those. You know, old data is just really not applicable. It's not specific enough. And so it has to all be recaptured. So companies are furiously scrambling, trying to get it, you know, traversing different parts of the world to get all the apple harvest data, as an example, from Chile to Washington to California, chasing the seasons, getting data, using very novel strategies to tag the data. Because I mean, getting the data is, you know, a start, but it has to be tagged, it has to be ground truth. All of those things have to happen. It's a very slow and expensive process. One thing that we're working on is, you know, each startup is having to do that over and over and over and over and over and duplicate it. That money is essentially being wasted. And it's not really, in many cases, providing differentiated value to that company. It's just something that has to be done to train a model to do whatever, drive along a straight row, identify an apple blossom, whatever the task, identify a bug, whatever the task might be. We're thinking about how to working, you know, between the university, you know, organizations like the Linux Foundation and the companies. How do we create an open platform where companies can use and share and integrate those data sets and the models that are needed, so they don't have to reuse it, and anybody can contribute to those data sets, which we understand they're going to be massive need for those as we scale up automation and robotics. So how can we create partnerships that allow, you know, companies to contribute things, farmers to contribute things, universities contribute, and then use those things and let companies build off of their differentiated products off of those things, because those data sets don't exist today and they're very expensive to obtain for the very specific purposes that are needed.
Yeah, this is a real point you bring here, Gabriel, and this brings a lot of question. actually how we do to collaborate, because data today for the startups are a key, and they are not ready to share it, and because it's part of their barrier to entry and their value. But like you said, it's at the end of the day, it's not so much valuable, because at the end of the day, everyone going to have access of this data. So it's really complex questions for every startups, and I think that every startups who are listening us today are asking some question around this data issue.
Yeah. So Julie, on that side also, I think we all need to change the conversation around data, right? To Gabriel's point, there's data that we need for training sets on the farm side of things. There's also data that is maybe proprietary to the startup's automation platform. So for example, there's data inside our tractor that's talking about how the tractor is working, right? So that kind of data, right? Yes, we need that for improving our product. That makes sense. But if it's farm data, then that belongs to the farmer. And at the end of the day, the farmer should have the freedom to kind of share it with other research institutions or other systems that they're using. And also there should be this open set of data, which is, which really allows us to make advancements like Gabriel is talking. Otherwise, we'll never get the accelerated development that we can. So for example, if it's anonymized data about farm obstacles, there's a huge data set out for urban mobility, but there's very little out for the farm side of things, for object identification or etc. There's no magic there. So why is that a secret? Why are we all kind of holding on to it as if it's going to make a big difference, right? If we need to identify a pest or a dog or something in the middle of the field or a ditch or a pothole or an irrigation leak, those should all be standard data sets and training sets that we can share with each other and really accelerate this. And there are data sets on the platform side that are unique that, for proprietary reasons we cannot share, right? If it comes down to how a tractor is working, obviously we don't want to share that. We need that to improve our product. So I think we need to segregate this data and have these conversations in those with those three types of data versus calling it one big data and then really holding it close to each other's chest. And I like what Gabriel had proposed of getting some third-party institutions to kind of manage and kind of champion this data collection and sharing.
And Julie, I will echo both of those comments, and I specifically will echo Gabe's comment about Linux Foundation for Agriculture. Western Growers has been involved in those conversations as well. They're making great progress over there. Linux has done some fantastic stuff in verticals like cars and energy that I think are very comparable to agriculture. And I think the open source movement will have a lot to say about how fast we can move on this stuff. So that's some exciting progress. And on the data point, the one point I would make to the startups, I have seen startups exhibit bad behavior. Our vineyard manager got a snail mail from a startup that shall remain nameless, but I know them, and I know that I know the CEO, basically saying that your data is now our data, and we're going to do with it what we want. And he called me and he said, "Hey, guess what I got in the mail? That's bad behavior, startup founders. If you're going to make a data play out of a startup, you need to be very transparent with the owner of that data. That is the farmer, that is the grower. And if you want to do a rev share model and talk about a business development opportunity, farmers are more than willing to have that conversation. You go around them, you'll hear from an attorney."
Thank you. We are 2 minutes left, so maybe Praveen, you want to add something really quickly?
Yeah, on the data side, Walt made a great point, right? And also now, especially if you go to other countries and you're thinking of a global product, there's now data rights, there's data privacy rights, there's data sharing legislation now either in place or coming through the pipelines. So to Walt's point, if you're in the data side of the ag and food business, really need to start thinking about being responsible with the data. Those days are done when you could just collect data from the farmers and act like it's a Wild West, right? And that actually does all of us a disservice when somebody does that. It moves it creates a lot of angst and cynicism amongst the farmers, rightfully so, because we're not being transparent with them, and that hurts all of us. So to Walt's point, you know, we should all be very careful and be responsible in how we deal with that data. So
yeah. So I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to conclude this panel, and it's a really interesting discussion. So if you want to continue and to have more of this discussion on ag robotic in the US, I invite you to join the first edition of the FIRA US in March 2022, co-organized with the University of California. And now just stay connected, because Monarch it's going to show you these tractors. So stay connected on the FIRA platform. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Take care.